guys, welcome back to your anatomy physiology review. I feel like I need like a little opening, like they have in YouTube videos, like, welcome back to anatomy fun with Sarah, or something weird like that. But anyway, today we're going over 8.2 and 8.3. 8.2 is on this next test that you're going to be taking. 8.3 is on the next one. So if you want to dip out halfway, I won't be offended. But part 2 is going to be the spinal cord. Part 3 is your sympathetic parasympathetic, so autonomic nervous system. Like always, I want to get through this quickly and painlessly as possible. So I did something I shouldn't have. I got overzealous and I drew myself a spinal cord a little prematurely. We have one thing to cover before we hit the spinal cord, so I'm going to try to draw in this little space right here. So for right now, ignore my nice big drawing and words. Just pay attention to this little empty box. Okay, well, kind of. To start, we're going to do anatomy of your spinal cord. So I am going to use this first. Move this out of the way. Okay, so first thing you need to know that you are going to be asked a ton about now and forever, and your spinal cord, these main concepts in the anatomy, you're going to need to know them to know the physiology behind your spinal cord. So to start, you have your dorsal root up here and your ventral root up in the front. So your dorsal root is in back. Everything's, I'm going to change the color real fast. It's going to be blue. So here is your dorsal root. Your dorsal root carries sensory information. Okay, so your dorsal root carries sensory information. In your dorsal root, you have a group of cell bodies called a ganglia. So this is just a collection of cell bodies, and it gets a special name. It's called your dorsal root ganglia. Dorsal root ganglia. Okay, if your dorsal root is carrying sensory information, you know that it's going to be carrying afferent information, right? A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. It's carrying afferent information to the spinal cord. Because remember, sensory is afferent, motor is efferent, your little same acronym we went over last time. Sensory afferent, motor efferent. So your dorsal root is going to carry sensory information, afferent information. You can use them interchangeably. On the other side, we will use red. You have your ventral root. So central root. And this carries motor information. With your ventral root motor information, remember sensory is afferent, so motor is going to be carrying efferent information, meaning it's going away. So information is going to come into the spinal cord via the dorsal root and leave the spinal cord via that ventral root, because sensory information comes in, motor information leaves. A few other things. When these come together, so right here, if we mix it, it makes purple. As these come together, they become both sensory and motor. Okay, this is going to be called your spinal nerve. Spinal nerve. Okay, it's when your dorsal root and your ventral root become one big nerve. You can see it over here as well. Here is your spinal nerve. I won't write it for sake of space. But spinal nerve is when dorsal root and ventral root combine and form one. So you're going to have both sensory and motor information traveling in that spinal nerve. Okay, meninges. Okay, here is the part where I'm going to draw down here. that I was talking about earlier. So you have your vertebrae. I'm going to draw that as like a brown circle. Okay, so here is your vertebrae. Here's the bones that you learned about. Okay, your vertebrae is a physical bone layer that's going to protect your spinal cord. Okay, so that's the outside. The outside is your vertebrae. It's your first layer of protection on your spinal cord. Then you're going to have 3 layers underneath that vertebrae. First layer, actually, I'm going to label this real fast. I'm going to run out of room if I label. That's okay. Vertebrae. Okay, the next layer under your vertebrae is called your dura mater. Dura mater is, translation is tough mother. And what this is, it's literally just a really tough fiber layer. Dura mater. Or matter, if you want to say matter. I don't know what it actually is. Okay, so your bone and your dura mater don't actually sit right on top of each other. They have in between, they've got a bunch of fat and blood vessels and adipose tissue and areolar tissue. I said fat twice, but you've got blood and fat packed in between your vertebrae and your dura mater. This space is called your epidural space. If you've ever had a baby and you got an epidural, this is where they injected the anesthetic into you, into that epidural space. It has in it areolar connective tissue, adipose tissue, and blood vessels. Note that the epidural space does not have any cerebral spinal fluid inside of it. It literally is just fat and blood and areolar connective tissue. Underneath your dura mater, you have your next layer called your arachnoid mater. So this is a net-like layer, and it sits right on that dura mater. I'm not doing a very good job drawing it, but the dura mater and the arachnoid mater sit right on top of each other. There is no space between dura and arachnoid. It's named arachnoid because it looks like a spider web. It's like a net, essentially. Okay, so that dura mater, that tough mother, is on the outside, protecting the spinal cord, and then the next protective layer is your arachnoid mater, and it's like a net or a spider web. And they do not have a space between them. Underneath your arachnoid mater, your final layer is called your pia mater. This sits directly on the spinal cord. So here is my pia mater. Your spinal cord sits directly underneath of it. Okay, so the blue was the pia mater. It's your last protective meninge. Okay, there is a gap between arachnoid mater and pia mater. This is full of cerebral spinal fluid. So here's my fluid. Okay, your pia mater and your arachnoid mater have a space. It's called your subarachnoid space. Subarachnoid space. And it houses cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, and then your last place you need to know on your layers is in the very middle of your spinal cord. You can see up here, it's got a little hole. That's called your central canal. Your central canal. And this also has cerebral spinal fluid inside of it. So if this picture doesn't make any sense to you, hopefully you can go back and watch the layers. You need to know the layers. You need to know where each space is found and what is found in each space. So if you can draw it, so if you said layers from the most outer to the most inner, and you could name your vertebrae, epidural space, dura mater, arachnoid mater, subarachnoid space, pia mater, spinal cord, central canal, that's going to help you a lot. You also need to know where there is cerebrospinal fluid, because if you were going to take a sample of cerebrospinal fluid, this is where you'd get it, and you need to know which layers you're going to penetrate to be able to pull out that fluid. Okay, your epidural space does not have cerebrospinal fluid, it's just fat and connective tissue. So hopefully that makes sense, my picture, it's very colorful. But know what the three meninges are, so dura, arachnoid, pia, and then know where the spaces are found, your epidural space, your subarachnoid space, and your central canal, and know what's found in each of them. And these are just all different layers to protect that spinal cord in your vertebral column. Okay, I am going to move on. Okay. Let me erase this. It's very colorful, sorry. I was being so prepared by drawing my little thing first. There we go. Okay, back to our big spinal cord. We have inside our spinal cord, we have two different types of tissue. We have white and gray matter. Okay, the outside of your spinal cord is white, while the inside is gray. I couldn't really find a way to draw this, so visualize that. The horns inside, this inside area is gray, while the outside of your spinal cord is white. This is going to be the opposite of your brain, it swaps. But your spinal cord inside is gray, outside is white. In your gray matter, the thing that makes it gray is your cell bodies. If you remember back, think back, I know it was a while ago, your ribosomes in your cell body are called Nissl bodies, and they have a gray tint to them. Only certain cells have them, and it's found in gray matter. That's what gives your gray matter its color, is the cell bodies that house those ribosomes, those Nissl bodies that you learned about earlier. The axons, that fatty axon is the white matter. So gray is cell bodies, white is the fatty myelinated axons. In your gray matter, you have two horns. You have your dorsal horn, and you have your ventral horn. Okay, these correspond with your dorsal root and your ventral root. Your dorsal horn, if you remember, dorsal root carries sensory information. So your dorsal horn is going to carry sensory information. It just connects. The information comes in and goes down. Your ventral root, your ventral horn is going to take your motor information and send it out your ventral root. Okay, so know that your dorsal horn has sensory, your ventral horn has motor. Know that sensory and afferent can be used interchangeably, and motor and efferent can be used interchangeably. Okay, this anatomy is going to be super important because you're going to get these questions about these big long processes that happen, and it says, like, if you pass through the dorsal horn, what type of information came in after this big long paragraph of information? And I know the dorsal horn houses sensory information, so I know that we're dealing with sensory, not motor. Yeah, so anatomy is going to be super, super important with your spinal cord. In your white matter, so remember, the inside your gray matter, outside is your white matter. In your white matter, you have columns. I actually don't know exactly where the columns are found, but I know there's one here, one on the side, and one in the middle, or two on the side. It doesn't matter. You just need to know that there's columns in your white matter. Some of them, the columns are going to take information to the brain and back down. Because remember, they're axons. So they're actually sending information to the brain so it can come back down. Your your tracks is what we call them. These axons that are going to take information to the brain and back. Your ascending tract is going to take sensory information to the brain. So sensory information to the brain. Your descending tracts, so nerves that are coming from the brain down, are going to be carrying information from the brain to your motor pathways. Okay, so ascending is taking sensory information up, while descending is taking motor information back down. And that just happens in your white matter. One special piece of white matter that you need to know about, I'm going to do this one purple as well, is your anterior white commissure. That's found right here. Anterior white commissure. This is really important because it's the place where information can switch sides. So let's say I have sensory information coming here. If I need to send out motor information on your opposite side, you're going to have to cross via that anterior white commissure. It doesn't look like white, but hopefully you can read that. Okay, so this is a bunch of axons. You know that because it's white matter, right? Because axons are white. So it's the place where information crosses. Sensory information can jump to the other side via this anterior white commissure to send motor information on the other side. And it can go the other direction too. Sensory information comes in, uses the anterior white commissure to get through to the ventral root on the other side. Okay. I'm not going to draw this, but nerves is your next thing. Nerves, they have 3 layers, your epineurium, perineurium, endoneurium. Epi means upon. Okay, epi means upon. So it's going to be upon. It's going to be the outside layer of your nerve. Okay, endo means inside. Endo is going to be that inside layer. So epi is the layer on the outside of your nerve, while your endoneurium is the innermost layer of your neuron. Okay, so know those, epi, peri, endo. Okay, know how to layer them. And recognize, if you asked, is the epineurium the most inner layer of your nerve, you'd say, nope, that would be your endoneurium. Okay, dermatome. I should have found a picture of this earlier, but I'm going to find a picture of it right now, really fast. Dermatome. Okay, here is your dermatome. There we go. Okay, dermatome is just a section of your body that corresponds with the spinal nerve. So your spinal nerve escape between your vertebrae, and between each vertebrae where each individual spinal nerve escapes, it's going to innervate a very specific part of your body. Okay, and these are called dermatomes. So you can see here, all these lines originate at a different place on your spinal cord. Okay, so a dermatome is just saying if this spinal nerve, let's say C4, escapes at this point on your back, this is the skin that's going to innervate. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to actually use T2 as an example. So here's T2. You don't need to know specifics. Just know that the general concept. So if T2, the spinal nerve, escaped the thoracic vertebrae at that point, it's going to innervate just this area of the body. Your T2 spinal nerve is not going to jump down to your sacrum and innervate there. It's only going to innervate where it escapes that spinal cord. Okay, so that's the dermatome. It just tells you where on the skin each individual spinal nerve innervates. A cool thing, you have diseases, well, it's not cool, but you have diseases in your spinal nerve that if you, like shingles is an example. If you get shingles, it affects one spinal nerve. So let's say I had shingles on that T2 vertebrae, in that T2 spinal nerve, I would only develop shingles in this line. It's really interesting because you can see exactly which nerve those shingles affected because it only affects that line. I had a cute lady I CNA'd for a little bit, and she had shingles, and every day it was like up here in her chest area, and she would like lift up her shirt and say, "Hey, look at my shingles. Look at my shingles. They're so cool." So I always think of her when I think of dermatomes. Okay, spinal nerve. Back to my picture. Where did it go? Here we go. Okay, back to our spinal cord. Once you get past your spinal nerve right here, once you get to your spinal nerve right here, it's going to branch into 3 different major nerves. These nerves are your sympathetic nerve, which is this one down here. Sympathetic nerve. Your next one is your anterior ramus. Had a brain cramp for a second. Anterior ramus. And your top one is going to be your posterior ramus. Posterior ramus. Okay, so your spinal nerve, this purple area, is going to branch into your posterior ramus, anterior ramus, and sympathetic nerve. Your sympathetic nerve is, I'm jumping a little bit. That's okay. Just know this. I don't know where in your book it says this, but you need to know this. Your sympathetic nerve has a gray rami and a white rami that feed into it. One is going to carry sensory and one is going to carry motor. What I want you to know is exactly what it says in your book. Literally just memorize that the definition of the gray rami and the white rami, and know they are on that sympathetic nerve. So the gray rami is postganglionic, and it is unmyelinated. Unmyelinated. So here's your ganglion. If your gray rami is postganglionic, it means that it's going to take information from your sympathetic nerve and take it towards your spinal nerve. Okay, just know gray is postganglionic and unmyelinated, while white is going to carry visceral information, more specifically, visceral motor information. Okay, and the white is myelinated. Remember, white means that it's myelinated as those axons. That will give away white, that it's myelinated, versus gray, which is unmyelinated. Okay, these are just what I want you to know about the rami. You don't need to know which one is which. They just feed into the sympathetic nerve, and one is unmyelinated while the other is myelinated, and the white is a visceral motor neuron. Okay, so that's your rami on your sympathetic right here. It says it in your book somewhere, but it says it on page 76 if your pages are still the same as me. Okay, each one of these nerves is going to have a sensory and a motor function. So the nerve is going to both carry motor information and bring back sensory information. Your posterior ramus The sensory information it takes away is to your skin and skeletal muscle of the back. Skeletal muscle of back. The motor information it takes is to your skeletal muscle, your glands, and your adipose tissue. Of the back. All of these are of your back. Okay, so your posterior ramus is going to bring in sensory information from the skin and skeletal muscle of your back, while it takes away motor information of your glands, skeletal muscle, and adipose tissue of your back. Remember, posterior is back, so if anything is dealing with your back, it's going to be your posterior ramus. Your anterior ramus, its sensory information goes from your ventrolateral body surface. So I'm going to just say side front body surface. Side/front body surface. Okay, so just like your posterior ramus did the back, your anterior ramus is going to do your sides and your front. It also is going to be your limbs. That's the other big one I want you to know. Limbs. Okay, so think your limbs come out your side, your anterior ramus is going from your side to your side, so it's going to obviously work on your limbs. Okay, so anterior ramus takes sensory information from your limbs. Your motor function of your anterior ramus is going to be to muscle, skeletal muscle more specifically, glands of your limbs, and body wall. Just meaning your side. Okay, so anterior ramus, let's say you got poked with a needle in your limb and you're like, ouch, that hurts. It's going to take, your anterior ramus is going to take that sensory information from your limb, bring it back via your dorsal root. Okay, so your information is coming here. You got sensory information that you got poked. It's coming through. It's going to hit your spinal nerve. Then it's going to branch because it's sensory into your dorsal root, come up your dorsal root into the dorsal horn. You're going to be, it's going to go up an ascending track into your brain and say, ouch, I just got poked by a needle. And then it's going to want your arm to pull back. So it's going to say, okay, we know that that hurts. We don't want to do that. And it's going to send motor information via your ventral horn, down your ventral root, through your spinal nerve, back to your anterior ramus, where it's going to tell your limbs to move. Okay? So that was just a brief overview of why we need to know sensory and motor. Okay, sympathetic. The sensory function of your sympathetic nerve is all your visceral organs. Visceral organs. So this would be like you downed a big hamburger or a Panda Express. I'll probably use Panda Express a lot in this lecture because it's my favorite. But you ate a bunch of Panda Express and your stomach knows, okay, you ate a bunch of Panda Express. That travels up via your sympathetic nerve because it's visceral, it's on the inside. Your motor function of your sympathetic nerve is going to be your travel to your thoracic cavity. So you know what's in your thoracic cavity, your lungs and your heart, and your abdominal pelvic cavity. Abdominal pelvic cavity. So this is from your book. This is what it says in it. Essentially, it's just visceral, right? Because visceral is on the inside. Your thoracic cavity and your abdominal pelvic cavity is your insides. So your posterior ramus does your back, anterior ramus does your front and your limbs, sympathetic nerve does everything on the inside. Okay, hopefully this little drawing helps. Hopefully you can read my handwriting. Let's make sure I did all of them. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, you will need to know how things travel. So let's say I want to eat my Panda Express. Okay, here's my scenario. You have Panda Express in front of you, and your stomach growls and tells you that you're really, really hungry and that you want to eat it. So your stomach, your insides are telling you via your sympathetic nerve, saying, okay, it's time to eat your Panda Express because I'm hungry. Your stomach is a visceral organ. It comes up. I don't know which Rami it's going to go up, but it's going to go up one of them. It's going to go, this is sensory information saying, okay, I'm really hungry. It's going to go to your dorsal root because it's sensory, travel through the dorsal horn, where it's going to travel up to your brain using an ascending tract. And your brain is going to say, okay, you're hungry, eat the Panda Express that's in front of you. And you'll be like, okay. And that information is going to come down your descending tract back to your spinal cord. It's going to go from your ventral root into your ventral horn into your ventral root, back through your spinal nerve, and it's going to go out to your limbs. So your limbs can shovel the food into your face. Okay, your limbs are the thing that actually helps you eat. Okay, so just understand how this works, how different parts of your body correspond to other parts of your body. Know which is sensory, which is motor. Hopefully this picture helps. If you draw this picture, when you sit down to take your test, you're going to be golden. Okay, so know how information travels, know what's sensory, what's motor, everything on here, essentially. Okay, circuit patterns. I am going to clear this real fast. Okay. Circuit patterns. We have different types of ways our neurons communicate with each other. Our first one is divergence. Divergence. This is when you have one neuron that's going to diverge into multiple neurons at a synapse. Okay, so it synapses on many different neurons. Okay, so divergence is when one neuron synapses on many neurons. Okay, this is how you're going to have a widespread response. You send one little stimulus down and it's like a ripple. It's going to just go to a bunch of other neurons. It's going to diverge. Convergence is the exact opposite. Convergence is when you have many neurons that are going to synapse on one neuron. So they're converging. Many neurons synapse onto one little neuron. These are my simple ways to draw neurons: cell, body, axon, in case you were wondering the little stick figures that I was drawing. Okay, so convergence, all the neurons are converging onto a single neuron. Serial processing. This is when you have one neuron synapse on one neuron, which synapses on one neuron, and you just have this chain of a bunch of neurons stacked in a row. Okay, they don't diverge, they don't converge, they just are traveling one neuron to the next in like a single file line. Parallel processing is a form of divergence, so parallel processing. Parallel processing happens when you had a neuron diverge. So I'm going to just draw this a little different so you can just see parallel. So this is one neuron that's going to diverge into many different neurons. and they're all going to travel to the same place. Okay, parallel processing needs divergence to occur before it can parallel process. Then what happens is you have parallel signals going all to the same place. So you just like multiplied your stimulus because you sent lots of different neurons instead of one at a time. Okay, parallel processing, it diverges and then it goes parallel to one place. All these neurons that you just diverged into are all going to innervate the same thing. Parallel processing just allows all these stronger stimulus because you're just getting all this all this information moving to one place at a time. Our last one is reverberation. Reverberation. Okay, reverberation is when you have one neuron that has a branch that comes back to itself and a branch that goes down to another neuron. Okay, so your information is going to both go from itself down to another neuron, but it's actually going to go from itself back up to itself. It reverberates back to itself. This is how we stay awake. You have neurons in your brain that are like, I want to fall asleep, I want to fall asleep, and then they stimulate themselves and say, oh, I'm awake. You have that stimulus of, I want to fall asleep, but it stimulates itself saying, oh no, wake up. And it's just this loop of constantly like maintaining consciousness until you tell that neuron, okay, it's fine, you stop working. And then once that reverberation stops, you're able to just send on that signal, okay, go to sleep. Yeah, so this is what keeps you awake. It also is how we breathe. Your body says, okay, breathe. It stimulates yourself again by the time you're done to, oh, breathe again. It goes in this circle. It's that cyclical motion. Okay, divergence, one neuron to many neurons. Convergence, many neurons onto one neuron. Serial processing is a single file line of neurons where one stimulates the next. Parallel processing is when you have divergence and then all the neurons that diverged are all going to the same location. They're running parallel to each other. Reverberation is when you have a neuron stimulate itself to keep it active, keep those action potentials firing constantly. Okay, reflex arc. Erase this. We did this a ton last week, so hopefully this is not something new, your reflex arc. It's when you have, this is just how your body functions. This is how you get a stimulus from the outside up into your brain, you figure out what to do with it, and send a motor command back. Okay, so you have a receptor, let's just use skin. You walk outside and it's hot, okay? It's hot. Your sensory receptors in your skin tell you, okay, it's really hot, you need to do something about this. That receptor sends information via your sensory neurons up to your brain. Sorry, I guess I could stop the share. Sends that information up into your brain. Your brain decides what it wants to do with it. Then it's going to say, okay, the brain decided that we want to take off our jacket because we're hot. So that motor information is going to travel down your motor or efferent neurons to an effector, which is going to be your skeletal muscles telling you, okay, take off your jacket because you're hot. Okay, it's just that loop. Receptor, sensory neuron, CNS, motor neuron, effector. Hopefully that's not new. That should be review from last week. Okay. How much more do we have? Oh, we are almost done with this chapter. This is not too long. Monosynaptic reflexes. So going back to my whiteboard. Monosynaptic reflex versus polysynaptic reflex. Monosynaptic. You have one neuron that synapses on one neuron. Okay? Here's your synapse where that pre-synaptic neuron and that post-synaptic neuron come together. You only have one synapse. Okay, if I was using polysynaptic, that would mean I would have one neuron that synapses on another neuron that synapses on another neuron, and so on and so forth. Okay, this you have one synapse, two synapses. Okay, you have more than one synapse. It's not talking about the number of neurons that you have. It's talking about the number of times the information is synapsed. One example of your monosynaptic reflex is going to be your stretch reflex. This is the reflex when you're at the doctor and they sit you down on the table and they hit your knee with the little hammer and your leg pops up. That's a stretch reflex. This is how your body protects itself from overstretching. So why your knee pops when your doctor hits your knee with your little triangle hammer thingy, it probably has a name. Your muscle, that tendon, your patella tendon, stretches. Okay, and it stretches so quickly because he's hitting it that your body freaks out and says, oh no, you guys are stretching too far. Like, be careful. We're going to lift your leg up to try to make that tendon shorter so we don't stretch it too much. Okay, so it's a way of protecting itself. And it is independent of your CNS. If you're thinking really, really hard, like, my doctor's going to hit my knee and I'm not going to have my foot pop up, you can't do it because it bypasses your CNS. It just has one synapse. It goes to your spinal cord, synapses, a sensory neuron goes to your spinal cord, synapses, and then goes back on a motor neuron without ever like asking the brain what the brain thought. Okay, it just had that one synapse. Okay, it just went straight from sensory to motor. That's it. These on your stretch reflex, you want to know your steps and like the different players in your stretch reflex. So our first one is our muscle spindles. Muscle spindles are going to be our receptor. So they're the thing that like figures out that you're being stretched too far. Okay, it figures out that you just got hit, is your muscle spindles. Okay, your muscle spindles are going to send information via your sensory neuron to your spinal cord. That spinal cord, that sensory neuron is going to synapse directly on a motor neuron, which is going to bring information back via that motor neuron. And your skeletal muscle is going to shorten and bring your leg up to try to help your knee from not stretching. Okay, so know that your muscle spindles are receptors. Your skeletal muscles are effectors. Know that it's monosynaptic reflex, meaning that there's just one synapse. Okay, this is the exact same way that you stand up straight. Stretch reflexes, you can just feel that your body's moving a certain way and your body will correct itself. Okay, some of us with our bad posture, me included, our muscle spindles have become immune to what our posture is supposed to be. But ideally, your muscle spindles in your back, in your spine, in your neck can sense, oh, we're stretching too much. And then they use that monosynaptic, those muscle spindles send a sensory neuron directly to a motor neuron saying, stand up. And your skeletal muscles stand up. Okay, polysynaptic reflexes are stretch and postural. Okay, our polysynaptic, we have three. You have your tendon, withdrawal, and crossed extensor. Okay, tendon reflexes are the things that monitor the tension on your tendon. And if you get too much tension, they're going to say, okay, we've stretched too far. If you are sedated, you're completely unconscious, your brain is like absent to the world. You can actually, every single one of you, you can grab your foot and put it by your face. You have no like limits on your flexibility when your brain is not involved. Okay, but your tendon reflexes are your brain keeping in check of like, hey, we don't want to rip our muscles, so we're not going to allow you to stretch too far. So your tendon reflexes stop you from stretching. I wish we could all be just unconscious and be super flexible and bendy because I was a dancer. But anyway, that's your tendon reflexes inhibiting you from stretching too far. And it does ask your brain what it wants. So if you shut your brain off, your tendon reflex isn't going to work. This is polysynaptic because your sensory neuron did have to go up to the brain using an interneuron and ask, hey, what do you want me to do? And it says, okay, stop stretching your muscles. And then that motor information is going to come down on a different neuron to tell you to stop stretching. So that's why it's polysynaptic. Withdrawal reflex is when you withdraw from something that's going to be painful. So let's say, what's something that's painful? Be creative as possible. You just stuck your finger in a pencil sharpener because I don't know why, you just did. You're immediately going to pull your hand back. This is your withdrawal reflex. You withdraw from things that are painful. So you stuck your finger in your pencil sharpener. Your receptor in your finger says like, you're so dumb, get your finger out of your pencil sharpener, this hurts. That sensory information is going to come up through your arm to your brain. It's going to, it's going to travel on an interneuron. Your sensory neuron is going to jump to an interneuron that goes up to your brain. Your brain is going to be like, why did she do that? And then tell your body, okay, pull your finger out of the pencil sharpener. And your motor neuron is going to come down and tell you to withdraw your hand. So those are withdrawal reflexes. It's when something in your body is painful. You burn your hand, you stub your toe. You stub your toe, what do? You immediately draw your foot to yourself to try to get away from the painful stimulus. This is called your flexor reflex also. You'll hear that too. Flexor. Because so if I put my hand on a hot stove, in order to get my hand off that hot stove, you have to flex your arm. So that's why it's called flexor and withdrawal. You need interneurons, that's why it's polysynaptic, because you do have to consult with your brain of what to do. Cross extensor reflexes. This is when something happens on one side of your body and the other side of your body is what actually takes care of the problem. So let's say you step on a tack with your foot, you didn't know it was there. You're immediately going to shift all of your weight onto your left leg, let's say I stepped with my right leg. Sorry, I should have specified. You step on a tack with your right leg. Immediately after that, you're going to shift your weight onto your left leg to withdraw from move off of that painful stimulus. Okay, so your left leg had to flex, your whole body had to shift to your left side, even though the painful stimulus was on your right side. You can have two things going at once because your right leg is going to go through a withdrawal reflex, but your left side of your body is going to compensate and take all of the weight on, it's going to cross over to the other side to help you avoid that painful stimulus. Okay, cross extensor. So if you have anything that says something happened on the right side, but your left side is the one that responded, cross extensor, it crossed over. Okay, that is that. So at this point, if you just dip out because this next part is not on your upcoming test, that's fine. Come back, watch it later for chapter 8, part 3. Okay, I might actually take a break for a second because I have a headache and I want to go get a drink. So I'll be back in like 2 minutes. Okay. We're back. Chapter 8, Part 3, Sympathetic, Parasympathetic. Sorry, I just got a text that was interesting. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. This is going to be one of those topics that you're going to see in second semester and third semester and in your nursing career and forever and always in the drugs that you're going to get. This is one of those chapters that you need to know. And you need to know it and you need to not dump it away. Because I know there's some chapters, as bad as it sounds, that you just dump, and that's fine. This is not one of them. You need to know this one in like such great detail that there's no way you're going to remember, forget any of it. Okay? Yeah. This just, it's super important. Get my papers. Okay. To start, review. Your somatic nervous system is going to affect voluntary things. Your autonomic nervous system is everything that's involuntary in your body. We're dealing with just the autonomic nervous system today. The autonomic nervous system is composed of two different things, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic systems, okay? So your sympathetic and parasympathetic, you have no control over them. They just happen automatically because they're part of your autonomic nervous system. Pretty much everything viscerally, so on the inside, is affected by your sympathetic and parasympathetic. You don't need to memorize like cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, urinary, reproductive. Just know that everything on the inside is going to be affected somehow. Your hypothalamus is what controls this. You have preganglionic neurons, postganglionic neurons. Hopefully that's a review. We literally just talked about it in the first one. Pre is the one that's sending information. Post is the thing that picks up the information. Ganglionic neurons. The ganglia is where the neurons synapse. So ganglia is where you have neuron cell bodies, where there's a bunch of synapses happening in one place. Okay. Ganglionic neurons are visceral motor neurons in your peripheral ganglia. I can't really explain that one, but know that definition. Ganglionic neurons are visceral motor neurons in peripheral ganglia. Your ganglionic neurons in your autonomic nervous system do not affect your skeletal muscle, right? Because it's autonomic nervous system. Your somatic nervous system is the one that affects skeletal muscle. So ganglionic neurons are only visceral, not somatic. They do not touch your skeletal muscle. They just deal with everything else that's on the inside. Okay. I think that's good on that. Okay, sympathetic. Start with sympathetic. This is your fight or flight. You'll hear that. Or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. There's three things, actually. This is someone jumps up behind you, scares you. That feeling of, I think I just had a heart attack and peed my pants at the same time, that's your sympathetic system, okay? Sympathetic nervous system is that scared, your heart rate is elevated, you're sweating, you're panicking. Okay, this is what happens. You'll hear run away from a bear. I don't know why anyone would run away from a bear in today's day and age, but if you find yourself in that situation, your sympathetic nervous system is the thing that's taking you away. Okay, it's heightening, it's your adrenaline. You'll hear that a lot. Your adrenaline is going. That's your sympathetic. It's fight or flight. Okay. I'm going to draw this really great picture. And if you memorize the pictures that I draw, just memorize them to the point you can draw them yourselves. This section will be a breeze. Okay? But if you don't, and you just try to memorize the words, maybe that works for you, but it's going to be tough. This is a lot of just pulling random facts out of your head about ganglion and what they affect. So hopefully these pictures help if you're visual. If not, just memorize the words, that's fine too. So go to my little whiteboard. Okay, maybe. There we go. Okay, whiteboard. Okay, sympathetic nervous system. Let's start. Here is going to be my lovely brain and spinal cord. Okay, brain, spinal cord. Not pretty, that's okay. This is, I'm gonna write sympathetic up here. Oops. Sympathetic. I have this nicer picture that if you would like it, just email me and I'll send it to you if this one doesn't work for you. But I'll do my best. Okay, your sympathetic nervous system is part of, it's also called your thoracolumbar region. Thoracolumbar region. Okay, so sympathetic is also known as thoracolumbar. That's just because it happens from your thoracic region to your lumbar region. You have in your sympathetic nervous system short preganglionic fibers, long postganglionic fibers. Just meaning that the ones that are on your spinal cord are short and the ones that are connected to them away are long. This causes a widespread, long-lasting response. Okay, so your thoracolumbar sympathetic is also known as thoracolumbar. You have short preganglionic neurons, long postganglionic neurons, and this causes a widespread, long-lasting response. The reason this is because I had a student, shout out, who told me the example of getting on a freeway. You drive to the freeway so you can ride on the freeway longer distances faster. Okay, so this is the little road that is the road by your house. It's the neighborhoods. It's slow and short, but once you get to the long postganglionic fiber, you're able to go fast in all different directions because you have different freeways going everywhere. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. The reason that it's a widespread response is because these long ganglions can reach farther away, whereas the short ones are at the beginning, so you can have those long ones that make a more widespread response. Okay. Your sympathetic system uses the hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, story that will help you always know how to spell epinephrine and norepinephrine. When I took anatomy the first time, I was at BYU. So it's like a lecture hall of 500 people. And I raised my hand to ask a question because I didn't understand. And I read epinephrine and I didn't know how to say it. And I called it epinephrine. So in front of everyone, I said something like, what releases epinephrine? And no one could figure out, they figured out it's epinephrine, and I got made fun of the rest of the semester for it. And so, epinephrine and norepinephrine, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Really special, but now you will never spell it wrong. Okay, epinephrine, norepinephrine. I did spell it wrong. After I said that, that's even more embarrassing. Wow, I'm just doing really good today. I was trying to tell a story and write at the same time. Norepinephrine. Okay, Your sympathetic system uses epinephrine and norepinephrine. These make it adrenergic. We're going to go over what that means in a little bit. Adrenergic. Okay, these are the random facts about the sympathetic system you need to know. Now, you're going to go through what each of the sympathetic ganglia do and where they go. Okay, this is just saying it goes from the thoracic region to the lumbar region. You have 3 ganglia or 3 divisions of your sympathetic nervous system. Your first one is your sympathetic chain ganglia. And it has 4 branches that come off of it. 2, 3, oops. 3 and 4. I might run out of room. That's okay. So your sympathetic chain ganglia, that's your first one. These go to 4 different places. It goes to your body wall, your thoracic cavity. So think about your thoracic cavity, what's inside there, your heart and your lungs, your head, and your limbs. Your sympathetic chain ganglia go to your body wall, your thoracic cavity, your head, and your limbs. Your next ganglia is called your collateral ganglia. And it just has 3 divisions, but they all go to the same place. So I'm going to just draw one for simplicity. These all go to your abdominopelvic cavity. Okay, what's in your abdominopelvic cavity? Your abdomen has your stomach, your intestines, your pelvic cavity has your bladder, reproductive. Okay, you will need to know like the organs. So it's going to ask like your stomach, which ganglia innervates your stomach in the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, you're going to need to know your stomach is in your abdominal pelvic cavity and it's innervated by your collateral ganglia. Collateral ganglia. Okay, the collateral ganglia innervates your entire abdominal pelvic cavity. The last section of your sympathetic system actually isn't a ganglia, but we call it the adrenal medulla. It's one giant neuron. This is the exception to our little rule. So here's my neuron. Here's my kidney. Here's my adrenal gland. And here is my blood. That's horrible. I'm sorry. Guys, I missed my whiteboard. I promise my handwriting and drawings aren't normally this awful. It's really hard to draw on here. Okay, so this exception, this is not a ganglia. It's called your adrenal medullae. Adrenal medullae. This neuron is going to go from your spinal cord all the way to your adrenal gland. So here's your adrenal gland. That adrenal gland releases epinephrine and norepinephrine into your bloodstream, boop, boop, where it can float away and affect your entire body. Because where does blood go? It goes to your entire body. Okay, so this adrenal medullae or medulla goes from your spinal cord, synapses on your adrenal gland. That adrenal gland is going to release epinephrine and norepinephrine and dump it into your blood. And that's going to send it to your entire body. And once it's in your blood, it's really hard to filter out your blood. So it's going to stick around for a long time. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are called adrenaline a lot of times. So you're going to have adrenaline or epinephrine literally pouring through your blood. Okay, that's why you get in a fight and you just feel like you're like on cloud nine, super happy, like super intense, or you have that feeling of like anxiety, heightened feelings, that's because you just dumped epinephrine into your blood via that adrenal medullae, and your sympathetic nervous system is turned on. Okay, this is your sympathetic picture. Like I said, if you would like a prettier version, I have it for you. Just email me. But hopefully that makes sense. Memorize this, everything on this page, just memorize it. I know that stinks, but so many questions come from this. And your sympathetic one. I'm going to do parasympathetic. I'm going to do one for parasympathetic as well. But here's your sympathetic nervous system in a nutshell. Okay, going on to what your sympathetic nervous system actually does. Okay, your sympathetic nervous system, I'm going to just close this down. Your sympathetic nervous system is that heightened feeling, that feeling of adrenaline rushing through you. So if you think of all the things that happen when your awareness is heightened, when you're anxious, when you have a lot of feeling and emotion going, you're going to be more mentally alert. You're running away from the bear, you become heightened aware of everything around you. You're going to use up more energy because all your muscles are going, all your brain's going, all of your energy is being used. Metabolic rate, same thing. Your body's just going to be trying to pump out energy as fast as it possibly can. Increased heart rate and blood pressure. If you've been scared and you feel like your heart's going to pound out of your chest, that's your sympathetic system increasing that heart rate and blood pressure. Increased muscle tone. You're able to randomly do things that you weren't able to do before. That's how pregnant lady can like lift up a car to save her baby. It's because she had this giant increase in muscle tone because of her sympathetic nervous system. Increased glycogen breakdown. Remember that glycogen is glucose that is stored glucose. So if you have stored glucose, you want to break it down as fast as you can so you can have a widespread like glycogen glucose dump, because you convert glucose into energy. You do the same thing with lipids. You convert them into energy because your body is just pumping energy through your veins. Increased respiratory rate. You start breathing faster to try to get more oxygen in so you can exchange that glucose into ATP or energy. Okay, what doesn't happen is when you're running from a bear, you don't need to like, oh, I need to sit down and I need to poop. Like that's not a thing. Okay, your body shuts down its digestive function. You don't need to digest your hamburger right now. There's more important things going on. So it shuts down digestion, shuts down your urinary system, shuts down your reproductive system. You're running away from a bear. You don't want to be having an erection. That just seems self-explanatory. You just shut down all these systems that aren't super necessary. So digestive gets shut down, reproductive gets shut down, urinary gets shut down. You all of a sudden don't care about danger. You're running away from a bear. You don't care that you have to jump over a fence really fast. You don't care that you're going to get scraped up. You just do it so you can get out of danger. Okay, you don't have a sense of what's dangerous in that moment. You also don't feel pain. That's why if you have this like heightened, you have adrenaline, let's say you were running a race and you're like, oh, I gotta win, I've got to do this. And then after you're like, ouch, I actually think I like broke my leg, but I just had no idea because I had so much adrenaline. That's because of your sympathetic system shuts down your pain. One thing is sweat too. Think you're running from a bear, you're going to be sweating profusely. Okay, so you're going to sweat a lot in your sympathetic system. Other than sweat, all other liquids that come from your body get shut down. You're not going to salivate because saliva is used for digestion, so you don't need that. You're not going to urinate. You're not going to have any reproductive secretions. Like sweat is the only secretion that is increased in sympathetic. Everything else is shut down. You get dry. Okay, that's sympathetic in a nutshell. We're going to talk about synapses real quick before we jump to parasympathetic. Clear this off. Okay, so we just did sympathetic. You had the short preganglionic neuron. My neuron didn't go straight. Let's try that again. Short preganglionic neuron. It didn't go straight again. I give up. That's fine. And a long postganglionic neuron. Your parasympathetic is the exact opposite. You have a long presynaptic neuron and a short postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so this is sympathetic and this is parasympathetic. Okay. You need to know the hormones that are associated with each. To make it easy, 3 of the 4 secrete acetylcholine. 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 Okay, your parasympathetic uses only acetylcholine. Your sympathetic uses acetylcholine between its pre and postsynaptic neuron. The exception to your acetylcholine is going to be that epinephrine that we talked about. So you have your epi and your norepi. Okay, this makes your sympathetic nervous system adrenergic. Okay, that's a word you're going to need to know. I spelled it wrong, obviously, because I spell things wrong. Adrenergic. Anywhere there's epinephrine and norepinephrine, it's going to be adrenergic. So your sympathetic system, its postganglionic neuron is adrenergic. Anywhere there's acetylcholine, you're going to be cholinergic. Okay, so you have a cholinergic synapse here, you have a cholinergic synapse here, and in your sympathetic, you do have a cholinergic synapse, but it's not your main one. Your adrenergic synapse is your main sympathetic one that secretes that epinephrine. Your acetylcholine is just getting information from one neuron to the next neuron. It doesn't actually have an effect on your sympathetic system. Your epinephrine and norepinephrine is what's actually performing actions and getting work done. Okay, so your parasympathetic system is known a lot of times as your cholinergic system. Okay, sympathetic, adrenergic, parasympathetic, cholinergic. Remember that forever and always and forever and always, and that is huge, okay? Cholinergic is parasympathetic, adrenergic is sympathetic. Another name for cholinergic is muscarinic. You'll see that too. Cholinergic or muscarinic, but you're going to see cholinergic a lot more than you see muscarinic. Okay, hopefully that made sense. The only place epinephrine and norepinephrine is secreted is at the end of your postganglionic neuron of your sympathetic division. Okay, fun stuff. Epinephrine, norepinephrine is secreted into your blood from your adrenal medulla too. Remember that. It's secreted at the end of your neurons and into your blood from your adrenal medulla. Refer to the picture if you don't remember what I'm talking about. Okay, parasympathetic. Let's do it. Start my picture. Draw my nice little brain and spinal cord again. Brain. Wow, that already is so bad. Let's try again. Brain. Spinal cord. Oop, that one got a skinny spinal cord. Okay, this is going to be your parasympathetic. Pathetic. I ran out of room. There you go. Okay, this one is called your craniosacral division. Craniosacral division. meaning it comes from your cranium or your brain and your sacrum, or that's your like where your tailbone is. We talked about this, but it has long preganglionic neurons and short postganglionic neurons. Okay, this causes a localized response. Okay, remember sympathetic was widespread. Parasympathetic is localized, it's smaller. And it also is short lasting. Okay, that's because parasympathetic doesn't dump epinephrine into the bloodstream. This only works using small amounts of acetylcholine from neurons. We also talked about it uses acetylcholine. Acetylcholine. Okay, that makes it a cholinergic. We talked about that. Also, it can be referred to as muscarinic. Okay, those are your random facts you need to know about your parasympathetic division. Now we're going to go into the nerves and ganglia that are associated with it. First thing you need to know, there are 4 nerves that come directly off your brain that you need to know. Okay, they are oculomotor, facial, glossopharyngeal, and vagus. Okay, you need to know those 4, have them memorized, and know which ganglia each of them go to. Okay, so to start, I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit more. We're going to go with oculomotor. So this is your first one. Boop. Oculomotor. Oculomotor nerve 3. Okay, this is our first nerve that comes directly off our brain. Its ganglia is called your ciliary ganglia. Your oculomotor nerve is going to cause your eye muscles to move. Your next nerve you need to know is facial. To make things more complicated, this one branches into 2 different ones. Here's my little branch. And facial. Sorry, guys. I can draw a lot faster on a whiteboard. Okay, so this is facial nerve 7. You don't need to know the numbers, just know what they're called. Your facial nerve has 2 ganglia associated with it because it branches. Your first one is your pterygopalatine ganglia. Your second one is your submandibular ganglia. Okay, so facial nerve branches into pterygopalatine or pterygopalatine and your submandibular ganglia. Your pterygopalatine works with your tear glands. Remember how I said your sympathetic system dries you out besides sweat, and your parasympathetic causes you to secrete everywhere? Your tears are included. When your parasympathetic is going, your eyes are going to be nice and lubricated and moist and wet. Okay, your submandibular innervates your salivary glands. Salivary glands. Again, you're going to be secreting all over the place. So think of parasympathetic as you're just like seeping from all of your orifices. Okay, so your eyes are watering, your mouth is watering because of your facial nerve. Your next nerve is going to be your glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal nerve 9. Okay, this ganglia is called your otic ganglia. This also goes to your salivary glands. Okay, so these go to the same place. Glossopharyngeal, glosso means tongue. Think your tongue secretes saliva. You have your salivary gland. Otic means mouth. Hopefully that helps. Your last nerve is your vagal nerve, or your vagus nerve. This one splits as well. Okay. Oh my gosh. There we go. Okay, so this is vagus nerve 10. Okay, to make it easy, this one, its ganglia are called the same thing, which is nice. Intramural. They're both called intramural, but they go to different places. One goes to the thoracic cavity, and one goes to your abdominal pelvic cavity. Okay, so your vagus nerve, thoracic, think what's in thoracic, your heart and your lungs, abdominal, pelvic, all of your gushy stuff, stomach, liver, intestines, pelvic, bladder, reproductive organs. Okay, for this, know the 4 nerves, know the ganglia that are associated with the nerves, know which nerve goes with which ganglia and where that nerve is going and what it's going to do. I know it's so much information, but if you draw this picture, memorize this picture, be able to just draw it in your sleep, you'll be just fine, because there's a ton of questions on these. Okay, your last one, move me out of the way. I don't know if I actually move on your screen. But our last one is going to be our pelvic nerve. Okay, this is not one that comes off your brain. It comes off your sacral division. That's why it's called cranial, brain, sacral, sacrum division. Okay, so these are your pelvic nerves. They also are called your intramural ganglia. And they innervate your pelvic cavity. So that one's pretty nice. Pelvic nerves, they're down by your pelvis. They go to your pelvic cavity. And intramural is just the name of the ganglia that vagus shares. So 3 of them are intramural. Okay. I think that is all on sympathetic. Oh, we're actually almost done. Okay. Memorize this picture. Again, if you need a nicer, prettier picture, let me know if that one doesn't make sense. This picture is going to help you a ton. Everything on this page is need to know information. I just tried to condense it down into something that kind of made more sense. Okay, parasympathetic activation. So we went over all the things sympathetic is. Parasympathetic is the exact opposite. They call it rest and digest. So you're eating your Panda Express and you're resting. Sounds heavenly. You're going to be secreting all over the place. Your saliva is secreting in your mouth. Your eyes are watery. Your pancreas and your stomach are secreting a bunch of digestive enzymes because you just ate a bunch of Panda Express. So you need to digest your Panda Express because you just ate it. You're going to have increased peristalsis. Peristalsis is when your intestines are like grumbly and gurgly, moving food through you. So that's part of digestion. You're going to have more of that because you're digesting food. This is the time now that it would be okay if you just sat down and pooped, because you're not running from a bear. You're just resting, probably watching Vampire Diaries or something fun like that while you eat your Panda Express. Sexual arousal. Now is a time when you can have an erection too, because you're not running from something. You're not trying to fight for your life. So an erection is fine during your parasympathetic activation. Side note, if you're like, that doesn't make sense. Parasympathetic is everything up until the last moment during orgasm, then it's sympathetic. Okay, so for all of you that are like, that's not really resting, it is resting until you get to your peak, and then it's sympathetic. Okay, there you go. Okay, decreased blood pressure. You're not running from anything. Your heart doesn't need to pump hard. You don't need to breathe heavy. Your blood pressure lowers. You're just relaxed. You're just chilling. You're going to absorb a lot more nutrients because you're digesting your food. Let me think. You start storing glycogen because you're saving it up for when your sympathetic gets activated again. I think that's everything. Decreased metabolic rate just means that you don't need as much energy right now, so you're not going to be creating as much energy. Digestive secretions, you're secreting everything everywhere. Your saliva secreting, your eyes are secreting, your stomach secreting, but your sweat isn't. You're not working hard, so your sweat doesn't need to increase. That's sympathetic. Okay. We're almost done. This has been a long one. Dual innervation. Everything that is affected by your sympathetic is also affected by your parasympathetic. So remember, your sympathetic caused your heart to beat faster. Your parasympathetic causes your heart to beat slower. Your heart is dual innervated, just meaning that you have both divisions of your autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic, innervating the same organs. That's dual innervation. It makes sense. The name spells that one out. And they work like opposites of each other. One's going to increase, one's going to decrease. One's going to cause you to secrete a lot of stuff, one's going to cause you to dry up. Autonomic tone. So you are constantly innervated by both. So sympathetic is innervating the heart, parasympathetic is innervating the heart. It's like a gas and a brake in a car, okay? But that's actually not a great example because you're not supposed to push them at the same time. But in this imaginary car, if you want to push the gas, you have to let off the brake and vice versa. Okay, you never take both feet off, or you never take one foot off and leave the other foot on in our imaginary car. So your sympathetic is your gas, parasympathetic is your brake. Okay, if your sympathetic is going, your parasympathetic's going to back off. If your sympathetic is going, parasympathetic is going, your sympathetic is going to back off. Okay, but you constantly have, both are constantly going. One is just going to be a lot stronger than the other one. So if my heart is beating really fast because you scared me, my parasympathetic nervous system was slowed down while my sympathetic nervous system was sped up. And vice versa. If I'm eating my Panda Express, having a jolly old time, my parasympathetic is going to increase and my sympathetic is going to back off. You are constantly having, both are constantly innervating. Your parasympathetic or sympathetic never completely shut off. They're constantly going. It just, depending on the situation, one is going to be stronger than the other. Okay, this gives you control. So let's say I'm driving my car and my foot's over, I just have my foot up on the dashboard. If I wanted to all of a sudden slam on my sympathetic gas pedal, it would take me a while to get down, get on the gas pedal and go. You want to constantly be ready to go at any moment. So if your sympathetic needs to go, it has a little bit of stimulus, it has its foot on the pedal, so it's able to slam down if needed. Okay, so it gives you control of both your sympathetic and your parasympathetic systems. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Visceral reflexes. Parasympathetic reflex. Okay, pupils. This was not reviewed before. If you are running away from a bear, you're running through a forest, your pupils are going to dilate really big because you want to take in all of the environment that you possibly can. If you're just resting and chilling, your pupils are going to get really small because you don't really care about your environment. You just care about what's right in front of you. Probably like Vampire Diaries, because that's a good show. Actually, I probably shouldn't recommend it. It's not very good. I like it, but that's okay. Okay, parasympathetic. sympathetic. Sorry, I should have read this. Okay, you can have reflexes in moments when you don't necessarily, you're not like fighting or being scared of something, or you're not just being relaxed. Like if you were to walk out into a bright light, your pupils are going to constrict because they're like, ouch, that hurts. I have too much light coming into my eyeball. So your pupils constrict. That's your parasympathetic that's doing it, but it's not necessarily because you were resting. It's just sometimes your parasympathetic and sympathetic can have, like, they can innervate even though it's not your typical rest and digest situation. And really, you're only going to see that with your pupils, the dilation and constriction of your pupils. Visceral reflex arc. Refer to the last video because I literally just talked about this. Receptor goes via a sensory tract to the brain. Brain figures out what to do with the information, sends it via a motor tract back to an effector. If that is not pounded into your head by this point, pound it in, because it's in like every chapter ever. Okay. That chain of going from a receptor to sensory to brain to motor to effector. Remember, you have an interneuron in the brain. If you're going up to the brain, you're going to be using interneurons. So it's going to be polysynaptic. This brings back, I feel like it's repetitive from last time and it's in a random place, but that's okay. Remember, polysynaptic, you have multiple synapses. If it's going up to your brain, you're using an interneuron, so you're going to have multiple synapses. You're going to have your sensory neuron synapse on the interneuron, your interneuron synapse on the motor neuron, and it's going to go through. Okay, these are your long reflexes. It takes a long time, relatively, to get from your sensory neuron to your interneuron to your motor neuron and cause an action. Long reflexes, they go to the brain and back. Short reflexes are like the stretch reflexes that we were talking about earlier. Your doctor hits your knee with the little plastic hammer, and your sensory neuron synapses directly on your motor neuron, doesn't go to your brain, bypasses your CNS completely. It just goes sensory to motor, and it's a short reflex. It doesn't head up to your brain. It doesn't go to your main CNS control in your brain. Okay. I feel like that should have been with last chapter, but it's on this chapter and it will be on this test. Okay, long reflexes go to your brain. Know the steps of your visceral reflex arc. Short reflexes bypass the CNS, and they're monosynaptic. Okay, we are done. That was a long one, but we covered 2 chapters. Good luck on your guys' tests. You guys are awesome. Say hi to me in the halls when you see me. I love you all. Goodbye.